welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your cookies and coffee, or are still enjoying them. This is like the U.S. Academy Awards, where they invite someone, everyone's like, why did they invite that person? And they're still up, and they're not that funny. But anyway, here I am, moderating the closing session. So this is our time to look back so that we can take stock, have a very exciting couple final actions, and make plans for the next time. One thing that I heard over and over on the first day was how clear the momentum of FDOs were. We'd been doing all this on Zoom, right? Except for in the 2019, that everything else was on Zoom. And it wasn't really apparent how big this community was, who was interested. So we finally were here together and we saw how far people were willing to come to talk about this. I heard a lot of people and I felt myself gratitude for being able to reconnect in person, to be able to see the whole person. And maybe there are things that you're glad people couldn't see on Zoom, but it's still nice to be able to get that 3D representation and things that you don't get over the computer. I think we could all say we're totally blown away with what Naturalis has done with the production quality. I mean, I don't know if you've been up near the stage, but it's so much more. There's like fabric printed, and this is like got the integrity of things they sell at IKEA. In fact, graduate students should be allowed to take these for end tables when the conference is over. Also, because we're at Naturalis, we had a multi-sensory program, which is not over, by the way, as I tried to indicate to get you to stay. We had the Fever Dream band. I don't know that that's their name, but I'm calling them that. And we had Julia Janssen talk about why she likes green. And I don't know about you, but I thought it was pretty relatable, the discussion about, do I know Julia? Does she know herself? Because after these few years, we're different people. But being together reminded me, if nothing else, we're still a community committed to data, to research, and to progress via data. We heard from luminaries like Bob Kahn and our own George Strawn, people who've changed the world and ushered in paradigm shifts that have changed every aspect of our lives. Even just think of sitting here in the conference, getting that note that it's time to sign the declaration, which, by the way, Barend's going to remind you to please do. We had several technical and application sessions held, and this conference attracted very respected people in the data community who know how FDOs could work, and people showed us early examples of how they're performing. And maybe as or more importantly, we have early career people here who are going to chart the future of how this will really happen. We all had moments that were shared epiphanies and some disagreements. Sometimes semantic disagreements, sometimes really substantial disagreements. But this is how the community, the FDO community, will move forward. It is a data concept. These conflicts unearth issues, embedded assumptions, and they create the space for better ideas. So we shouldn't feel bad that those happen. This is why we get together in person. And please know that this meeting, this open meeting, was to get the community together and to get us talking. So I think we achieved that. So if nothing else, please stay involved. Please keep engaging each other and invite others who should have been part of this conversation. Okay, with that, I'd like to invite Carol, Paolo, and Peter to the stage. And we're going to hear from Peter first. Well, we'll just, that's true, okay.
Whatever you like.
I know, we're computer people. This can be a little awkward. So if you haven't met him already, this is Peter Wittenburg. Well, when we pass back drafts, he always puts P-E-W-I, and I always think that's so funny because he is the opposite of Pee-wee. He's a giant for me, and a person really committed to making an impact with FDOs. He spends so much time. You can't believe his work ethic, his energy, and how tirelessly he and George have worked together at nurturing this forum. So Peter's first going to talk to us about what happened in the working groups, and then he'll move into a few minutes on policies and governance, control and ownership.
Okay, thank you. So let me first start saying, I don't know how you feel, that I really enjoyed the panels. I just wanted to sit down, close my mouth, and listen. And I did so. And what I normally like to do is then go away, go in the train and think about all this and try to make sense of all this. But now I got a task to do, so I will share some highlights with you. I hope you agree with me then. And as Christine said, especially from the Saras and Annas, I don't know whether they're still here, the comments, we thought we should briefly go about the Wednesday meetings when the working groups came together that did all the hard work. Not the only people who did the hard work, but who did the hard work on specification and implementation. So let me first start with a few comments on these Wednesday sessions, since they will be an answer to what I heard from some colleagues here. So let me just say again that this conference, for many of us who are engaged in FDF Forum, is how do you say, a final point of the first phase or second phase, as Larry pronounced it, told it. So we did some work. We had, in the working groups, we had 2 years' time to do something, and I guess we did something, all based on voluntary work. And now we see that there is a need to change. And let me briefly then go back to the discussions which we had on Wednesday. So I think we have proper specification. We understand now much better what FDOs are. The small gang. We have proper specifications out. I would not say they are ready and finalized, not at all. But thanks to the people in the working groups, we really push this specification work and have basically 3 documents out there. It's all jargon. These documents, I heard some people, I don't understand anything. It's real jargon, but I hope that those people who complain about the jargon understand that we needed to talk jargon to make progress. But as I said, we need now to change. Since we have done our basic specification and, as you heard, some implementation work, and now we have to completely change and then see how we will do it in the next phase or so. Let me also mention there was the question of openness. So we will have on the specification documents, if you are registered, and the suggestion is that all people who registered for the conference will be added to our 500 list of FDO community, as we call it. If you don't want that, let us know, but we do just add, and you will get an email probably next week, over next week, saying here are the specifications. We'll have open it for another months, 2 months, and then create a new version. But then the version will go out via RDA channel or open on the web. So that's what we understood also from Carol's comment. We need to open up, even if it's jargon in there. Who cares? We need to do more, and in the working groups session we already discussed that. So we need to go away from jargon. And if you had the chance, we already created 4 videos. Maybe not the best videos, since we don't have money, but we already created videos. And the first video is, what is an FDO? I hope Christine made it. I hope in very simple words, you never know. But we really start now to change away from jargon to connect to communities. But I think it's also important to remind you all that what FDOs are about is not a vertical approach. It's not about software and functionality we offer to the community, to the researchers. It's something horizontal at the below layer. And I remember when I talked with my scientific directors at the Max Planck Institute in Nijmegen, when the internet came up and we were proud to have the first emails exchange, they say, oh, we have fax machines. We don't need this play stuff. The same happened, by the way, when the web came up. So I really, and that's something Bob also keeps saying, we should be careful to not oversell and how do you say, create a hype or so. It's really at an horizontal layer. We believe that it has a high potential, and I share this with George, but we don't know yet. But we should not oversell and create a hype. So that's what I would like to say about the working group. So we're really ready to change. what we started on Wednesday is we started very small, identifying open issues, collections, the relation between FDOs and operation, and so forth. There are more. So we start collecting gaps, and the intention is now, I think, or the task for the next phase is to organize open workshops, workshops, virtual, invite people, experts in these fields where we see there are open gaps, and have discussions about this. So that's what I wanted to say about the working groups. And now let me briefly make some words about the research track. So while you all heard this, and you heard the keynote from Jan Bjali about work in the area of neuroscience. And I think if I should say what is a take-away message for me or so, I think the big point he made was that the key for them is the curated and aggregated knowledge graph and the metadata, which is feeding the knowledge graph. I think that his message, and the tools, of course, around that this was the core message from Jan, since this, as he said, will really help in the transformation of brain research, and also in the direction to improve replication and reproducibility, which is still a big gap. And of course, as he said, this knowledge graph is also a way to integrate between all the different providers, repositories, or whatever we call them. So all these different people who are engaged in the field, bring them together via the metadata, via the knowledge graph layer. One thing which he reminded us is that there is still a huge amount of data which is closed and for reasons which we all understand and partly underused. And Carol also pointed out that to the area of long-tail data which is out there, and there are of course huge problems how to integrate them. We had a short discussion about silos, and there were of course immediately responses to this. So our colleague Niklas wanted to provoke a bit the discussion when he said, well, silos are important. What he meant, of course, is that behind these silos there are engaged communities, and I think that's what we all accept. There's no doubt about it. The connotation, the bad connotation you pointed out, Barend, is of course, and which we also share, is that silos are often meant to be closed, or often closed, and there are people who do their own way, not interoperable, and so forth. So we had this short discussion about silos, but I think we all share the same concept of silos. There are good aspects and bad aspects, and we have to overcome the bad aspects. We heard also some statement, especially here from Maike, that FDOs are seen as a way to organize the dynamic and distributed domain of data or digital entities, which we have in all disciplines worldwide, and with this, of course, with a perspective to create a stability over decades. I think this is the big challenge for our data domains. How to maintain a body which is changing in all kinds, how to maintain such a body that there's some stability which we can rely on for the next decades or even more. Since finally it's our human knowledge, it will be digital and not paper anymore. There was a notion about training. I think we all share this. I don't have to make big words. So how important it is to do training and so forth in all these different ways we're doing. And there was also a short discussion about reinventing the wheel. I think Niklas made the point that, of course, science is all about reinventing the wheel. And we all did this, I guess, in our scientific life, research life. But I think we also agreed on the statement which was made afterwards in the discussion that at horizontal layers, it's good to have some consolidation and convergence, right? So there is this balance always. Now let me briefly mention one point which Niklas, Jan Bjali, and myself, standing there, discussed. So what you see from Jan Bjali's work, eBrain, is that they get a lot of support, funding. And we did briefly, and Niklas has the same, and we all have the same. We get a lot of funding, but do we have a business model which is sustainable? And both Björn and Jan said, no, we don't have that yet. So we get a lot of money for this important curation. And we know all that this is so important, have this knowledge graph or metadata or whatever you call it. But it has to be curated, and that costs money. And there's no answer, at least we three found, there's no answer yet how to make this sustainable. Well, I could tell you a discussion about the Max Planck Institute Society, how we solved that, but I will bet us. And it was astonishing for our directors, but I will not do it now. But if you're interested, let me know at the wine. We got some wine. So some words about the 7B, the second session this morning on the scientific track, very short. I think we got brilliant lightning talks, short ones, where we all heard about there are implementations. People work, not talk alone about these concepts, but they work it. They apply it to science. What is missing, of course, to have from the specification documents which we have, refer to these implementation to help you to understand that this is not so, basically doing it is not so complicated as the specification may sound. And of course, as I already mentioned, Anne and Sarah, thank you a lot, made all these points about jargon, engagement, benefits for researchers and so forth, but I already answered that. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Peter. So next I'd like to invite up Carol Goebel, who worked with Stian Soiland-Reyes, who's hopefully on a train to wherever he's supposed to be getting and not stuck en route. They are both at the University of Manchester's Computer Science Department, and Carol's picking up the theme of FDOs and the next revolution of computer and data management.
So thank you very much. I found out I was doing this about 10 minutes ago. Stian works for me, but actually I think I'm beginning to wonder if I work for him, to be honest. So I'm sight reading his notes, so bear with me. Okay, so the first piece we wanted to talk about that the technology panels addressed was a thing that I think is possibly overlooked, which is fair digital objects, in the end, are middleware. Is going to be the infrastructure piece. Because you're not going to say as a researcher, hey, I must get a fair digital object. What you're going to say is, I want to get a digital twin, and then I want that to be populated, and fair digital objects are actually part of the infrastructure that will work seamlessly in order to be able to make that happen. And that means a key component, key stakeholder is your research infrastructures, your e-infrastructures, your research software engineers, your developers, your repositories, your commercial systems. I can see Mark there waving the hand for commercial systems. And that means they have to be developer friendly. So you need to have developer engagement. Examples, tutorials, use cases, all the stuff that requires real adoption by developers. The second piece is that we talked a lot about separation of concerns. And that means there's this notion of what is a fair digital object from the point of view as a framework or an abstraction, as George put it, or as a pattern, as I kind of put it, which is guidelines for implementers and communities, and that's kind of where the specification space is, and then implementations. And there'll be many different implementations, because one of the big things that came across was diversity. There's a big diversity in the research infrastructures, there's a big diversity in the platforms and frameworks that we're all using, and there are many different ways to do this, because we are not just coming to the internet and the web and so on without decades of tooling, without decades of infrastructure, protocols and approaches. And that means we need to stand on the shoulders of giants, and somebody said actually, we're standing on the toes of giants at the moment. We're kind of sort of trying to not really try to think about things as if we have to invent new things, but actually we can reuse an awful lot of what we already have. And if you're reusing what we already have, then that makes it a lot easier as a developer, because you've got a developer pathway for our fair digital objects. So it's really important that we think about how do we use knowledge graphs? How do we use the technologies that we already have to our hands? And there won't be a single solution. And that's okay to have that kind of diversity. That came across very strongly. This also comes down to figure it out by doing it, and then show it works, and then remove what is not needed. So Bob mentioned that. What you want is the simplest, not the most complicated. So what is the added value that DOIPs give us that DNS HTTP doesn't give us? We need to kind of clarify those kinds of things. And I think in the notes it says, one of the things that really needs to be addressed here is machine actionability, because that bit is really kind of needs quite a lot of thinking about what is the real added value there. And in order to be able to really go in that direction, we need to listen to users, and users mean also developers, right? The people who are going to deliver this, and the people who are going to use the platforms that are going to be delivered. So this is a complicated multi-stakeholder community, and it's one team. It all has to be together as one team right from the get-go. Can't be a boys' club. And that was mentioned, that it kind of feels like it's a bit of a boys' club. And I'm glad, because I'm not Stian, because I've redressed some of the reporting diversity. And that's really important, that we don't make sure that it's not just an old boys' club. So I think we really need to drive this notion of FDO being an open activity, and Peter mentioned that there's now going to open up all the specifications and so on, but it really needs to adopt an open methodology of delivery. So that doesn't mean, opening up a few documents. It means, what is the open process in order to be able to get feedback? Can we track all that kind of feedback? What's the approaches there? I've worked on standards for a long time. I know several of you have worked on standards. It's a meeting every week, right? We're following a strict methodology with complete transparency for years. That's how you get standards. And this is what we have to do here. I know there's a rush, but if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And that's what we need to do in with the whole fair digital object world, bringing in our users. And I would say that there's a framework for user experience, which says you need 4 things to make a good user experience: adoptability, usability, clear value, and desirability. And those 4 things are what we need to really bring to both our user community and the developer community in order to be able to achieve. And then there was a discussion on fair implementation profiles, which I didn't attend, so I'm going to see Eric. He can check if these responses are sensible. But the take here in the notes are, this rapidly moved away from just technical discussions about how do we do fair with respect to research objects and fair digital objects, but also talked about data stewardship, management plans, various community effort, stakeholders. So again, we get the same theme, right? It's not just a technical issue. It's to do with the holistic view of a one team together, including incentives and non-functional requirements, I would say. So quite a lot of the FDO at the moment specs are thinking about functional requirements. Non-functional requirements are things like, does it scale? Will it last? Will this actually be able to do with trillions of identifiers? What happens when everything changes? What happens with versioning? What happens when people move from different organizations? And what happens in churn? Is it performant? So these are important adoptability pieces as well from the technical point of view. And finally, there's a point here that says policy. We've already seen some convergence and willingness to collaborate at this conference. It's been really a positive. I think we moved forward a lot. There's already been, some movement around the Leiden Declaration in response to openness, so we can listen, and we should listen more. If we can agree on common principles, we don't have to settle on implementations. So don't think about this, I'm building a system. Think I am enabling multiple implementations. And somebody said we have to walk before we can run. Well, we have to crawl before we can walk, before we can run. And we're kind of at the crawling stage, I would say. Don't fret. It takes time. Time is okay. We know we can do this if we don't rush too much. And I think that's an important point to take away. So I hope I've done Stian justice. That was me sight reading. If there's any comments from anybody who are in those technical sessions to correct any of my points, I'd be happy to hear. But I hope that was helpful.
Thank you so much, Carol. And as you were talking about walking, crawling, and running, I was thinking about my coming up and down these stairs. I feel like I'm getting better at it. But next, I'd like to invite up to the stage Paolo Budroni. He's going to show us how these cubes can be stand-up desks. Very impressive. He's based at the Technical University of Vienna, where he's heading the EOSC activities in Austria. Besides his past activities in research data management, he's the chair of the E-Infrastructures Reflection Group, which is a member states policy advisory body. And he's going to talk to us, I misspoke earlier, he's doing the policies and governance and control and ownership thread.
So thank you very much. So I'm resuming now two panels, both of them addressing policies and governance issues. The ancient Romans said when they were drinking the milk, the best part is at the end. It's the sweet part where there is the honey, when they arrived at the bottom of the glass. So I will start from the end. So what should the forum be at the end? It was discussed. Should it be a legal issue, a legal status, or should it not have an illegal status? The forum, it was said, could be one of the several initiatives with a legal status. Maybe we should avoid to have it. But it was also stated that a legal recognized counterpart for funders, for example, the European Commission, would help to define standards and codified models of reference to be adopted in the funding lines. And this is something which was stressed at least 2 or 3 times. It could be an umbrella forum and facilitate the conception of an overall strategy and act as a governance forum for technical and operational issues or topics across all main stakeholders like academia, industry, societies, and again, funders. So this is maybe the end of a process, but how can we then arrive to this end of the process? So we have now the fair digital objects, like these cubes. We now have to understand on how to introduce policies and governing mechanism in order to you said, from crawling to walk and then to running. And not to be fast, but to go far. How can we do this? Well, first of all, we know that we have identified a lot of stakeholders. They were mentioned, they were also invited to participate to this successful conference. But let's try to understand if there are some more stakeholders, let's call them hidden players, that are worth to be invited in this endeavor, in this beautiful endeavor. So beside the identified players like researchers communities, decision-making entities, rectors, computer centers, libraries, whatever, we can mention the hidden players that were mentioned during the 2 panels. So, for example, the research-performing museums and cultural heritage institutions that can create spaces of convergence of knowledge and discussions in order to upskill science and reach out. They are of relevance. They should not be forgotten in this endeavor. Then the infrastructures that offer the infrastructures and the services which allow the adoption of the FDOs at global level. So a good example was mentioned, the AAI services, or let's think, reflect about EduRoam. Who is offering these? Well, these services, they should be invited in this journey. So the federated services that are offered through the connections. Then the European ERICs, the infrastructures with the legal status. Among them also the 5 thematic science clusters, or the service providing entities which use the label FAIR, or concerning the EOSC building process, the tripartite governing bodies that play a transversal role. For example, well, no examples. And then the UNESCO was mentioned, and the initiatives of the UNESCO, and then not yet identified partners in other domains, regions on a global scale, or, for example, the indigenous communities that were mentioned by Mark. So these are possible partners in order to enlarge the vision of the federal, Fair Digital Object and the work of the forum. It was also mentioned that there are legal frames that are, should be respected. Why? Because ensuring legal and ethical compliance is a key issue in the context of a trusted digital ecosystem of connected services. So the key word is trusted. And on the basis of this, and it was mentioned in the last panel, we have the identification of ethical issues that should be tackled at the beginning. The funders. There was also some discussion about the funders, because we need the money, we need the resources, so the interaction with the funders, it's a triangle. The interaction with the funders needs the approach by the forum, but it also needs the approach of the communities, which are then the beneficiaries of the work. The responsibility of the funders, including the European Commission and the possible inclusion of further players, the impact of the introduction of FDOs can help in reducing this way the inequalities among countries and regions on a global scale. This could be one of the benefits. Through their policies, funders have a crucial role in this process. They may contribute to more sustainable developments, and they can steer these processes. So the interaction with the funders is needed from the beginning on. There are also some actions that can be filtered out through the discussions we had in these two panels. I would like to mention some of these possible actions. So, for example, one action is the definition of standard bottom-up processes in the introduction of FDOs, in the funding lines of funding bodies again, or create feedback mechanisms with addresses of funding lines in order to improve actions. So this dialogue between, so you are getting the resources, so give us some impulses in order to understand on how to produce better funding lines related to the Fair Digital Object and its adoption. Another possible task to be assigned to funders is the financing of dedicated skills development programs. This was mentioned several times. So the human factor is really crucial. Another possible task to be assigned is the financing. Well, I mentioned it, sorry. So my final message as a resume, it's my final message of just of the two panels, not of the whole conference, is that the forum could be here to facilitate the global adoption of FDOs in a global trusted data space. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Paolo, Carol / Stian, and Peter. That was wonderful. now I'd like to invite up my good friend, Barend Mons, faculty at LUMC, LACDR, one of the directors of the Go Fair Foundation, president of CODATA, and if you didn't know, sort of a city developer now. He's taken the Puist House, the old plague house, and revitalized it. It will be a learning and co-development space around fair. So maybe next time we're in Leiden, we'll be there together.
Thank you. Could I have the slide of the declaration, because I'm supposed to explain the declaration. Can you put it up now? So this is the declaration, but, oh, sorry. This is the machine-readable version. Sorry. But I just put this up to know that our declaration, that you will see later, is as abracadabra to the machine as this is to you, except for Tobias, who made this morning when I got the idea. So this is another publication, doesn't matter. But obviously, we have to eat our own dog food. We'll make the declaration machine readable. Okay, that is. But just to make this point, that even in the last discussion, it was authentication, authorization, trust. If it is true that more and more in the future machines are our users, our assistants, I hope, then we also need to learn how to trust virtual machines and have them authenticate themselves. There is already ontology-based access control for virtual machines that visit data. So that was to remind me that we are actually talking about machine actionability here. So you will see the real declaration later. It is also in your app, so you can read it as a human. Now, the declaration is already signed. The last time I checked right now, things are coming in, close to 100 signatures, and I hope all of you will sign up. Also, a lot of people that are not here. But what I also would like to mention is that we had a meeting earlier this week with the OSCAR people and with the Go Fair officers from multiple countries. OSCAR being the Open Science Cloud Executive Roundtable, let's say the Karel Luijbens of this world, Shamo from Africa, Mark Leggett from Canada, and so on. And we are preparing a little commitment to action, because it's nice to have a declaration and it could gather digital dust very soon. So we actually have said something like, I mean, we'll come with a more text, we'll try this out for a year in our respective constituencies, and we commit to meet again in about a year from now to see where the hurdles were, maybe to reconsider, you know, even the specs or whatever, or look at the best implementations. So that is the declaration is signed by you as an individual. Of course, you can give your affiliation, but later on, of course, we hope during the year that more and more organizations will sign up and say, okay, we are going to try this seriously. So then I was very moved by the song. I'm a singer myself, don't worry, I'm not going to sing, but by the song Kissed by the Machine. And I think the final message, because I want to gather some minutes back from the time we are behind, I still want to say that this was exciting. You can be kissed by a machine. But let me finalize by saying, if you're not a fair digital object, you will be missed by the machine. Okay? So, with that, I think that's enough about the declaration. Please sign it. Oh, you want me to stay on? Or?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much, Barend, and thank you for the humor. It's always appreciated. Well, I think now it's time for you to invite up Stan, and for us to, whoever has the ceremonial thing, they could bring that. That would be good too.
Okay, so now it's time to invite Stan Giele onto the stage. He is currently the chair of the steering board, or whatever it's called at the moment, of the Netherlands platform or program for open science. Just funded. We will hear more about it from Stan. But I know Stan for a long time as an established researcher, but I first met him actually when he got the money from the ministry to fund Go Fair. And the first round went via SURF and the second round to the Go Fair Foundation. So thank you very much for that, Stan. It really led to a lot of activity. And Stan was at that time the chair of NWO, our national funder. He can say a few words about that himself. And we now will let him say a few words at his own discretion, but also maybe ask some questions.
Okay.
So, Stan, floor is yours.
Well, I'm very impressed by the activities of this community over here, for various reasons. It was just mentioned, I was president of the Dutch Research Council, NWO. I was also active in Science Europe, which is an organization of all the funders in Europe, and approached the European Commission to promote, well, to emphasize the impact of open access and open science. And I think, well, we got some agreement that in the framework of Science Europe, there are now guidelines about how researchers should proceed if they get a grant and about storing their data. And I think in that perspective, I think you're doing paying a great service to the community, because as a funder, we require that a researcher, if he get a grant, that he publishes data, open access and open science. And that means when you publish, you store your data in a repository. But the aim is not to store your data in a repository. The aim is that the data are accessible for everyone who's interested in your research activities. And for data, it's relatively easy, I would say. I'm a physicist, and physics, everything is a spectrum. You know, it's wavelength, visible light, infrared, X-ray. That's easy. But if you go to life sciences, that's way more complicated. And basically, the output of research is way more than just the data. We all talk about software, we talk about kind of experimental protocols, we talk about methodology, the topic of AI has been mentioned a few times, how we should deal with the AI. So I think in that perspective, you're doing a great job, because that is really necessary to make the results of publicly funded research accessible for everyone. So let's say, I cannot speak about Europe, but on behalf of all the funders, thank you very much for your activities, because I think you're doing a great job, which is very important for science.
Thank you. And the national MPOS, let's say, that what I was very glad about when it was finally funded after a lot of years. First of all, when we started to talk data stewardship in 2013 for the eScience Center to NWO, people said, what? Data stewardship? And now infrastructure, now a lot has changed. So I'm also very happy to say that in the MPOS there is a clear international focus. Now we are such a small country, if you move you are abroad, so we have to look over our borders, that's clear. But can you say a little more about the international focus that is also there, and indeed the recognition that not only the rocket science needs to be funded, but also the rocket launch.
Yeah,
you know,
that's
the infrastructure.
Most funders, they don't want to pay for the ingredients of the pie, they want to pay for the cream on top of it, right? But the problem is to get funding for the ingredients of the pie. But what I just said, I think you have a good case to go to funders, to go to Europe and say, well, we need a little bit of money. I mean, compared to the total budget, it's nothing. But we need a little money just to make sure that there is a pie. And that's also necessary, I think, to, let's say, to meet the requirements by European Commission and by the funders. So I can't give you the money right now, but I think you have a strong case, and I would definitely use that opportunity to build your case.
And on the international thing also, we work very, watch out there.
Yeah.
So we work very closely, for example, with Christine, but also around the whole world. And what we experience is that the international support and coordination that is needed, which is not rocket science, is extremely difficult to fund.
Yes.
Yeah.
While indeed it's a fraction of the money. So I'm glad that MPOS has a keen eye on international cooperation. Can you say a few words about that?
Well, MPOS, I mean, the Dutch community, we were one of the first, let's say, to commit to Plan S, which dealt with open science. We also, we were one of the, I think, NWO was the basic driver for the first agreement on research data management plan in Europe, which is now used by the European Commission. So from the perspective, I think the Netherlands, if I may say so, is one of the front runners regarding open science, and we are really proud on that, and we want to support that. So we really want to build up international coalitions, because science is an international activity. It doesn't make sense if we in the Netherlands, in a small country, make up some great plans. It only works if the whole scientific community adopts the guidelines that you will develop. So we really support that. I mentioned Plan S, Coalition S, but there are many other activities, at least I think in Europe, but gradually I think we also within Europe are reaching out to other continents because we're all facing the same problem, right? And that's why I'm very happy that this is an international conference with people all over the world. Yeah, very good.
So, Christine, before you hand over the declaration, the physical one.
Yes.
No, don't do that.
Okay.
So
I thought it was my Vanna White moment. Okay, wrong cue.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. Okay, but do you have any questions, or is this the time to hand over the declaration?
I just have one question to either of you. So years later, when we look back on this moment, what do you think the significance will be? Or what would you like the significance to embody?
This is very appropriate that you had a meeting in Leiden, because I think the first meeting on FAIR was funded by NWO and took place in Leiden, the Lawrence Center. So now we have this meeting. So what I predict is that in a couple of years that you will have another meeting in Leiden where we can look back on what was done in the past, and I hope that we will be able to see that there's now a general agreement about principles for implementation on FAIR, the FAIR concept. I'm very pleased to hear that there's really you're open-minded regarding to the many different. Well, you foster many implementations, and that I think that's very important, because we have some frontrunners and communities who were very active from the very beginning and developed their own, let's say, their own standards. There are basically you really want different implementation to see what works best and to evaluate. So let's say in 5 years from now, it would be great, you know, if there are guidelines, if it's clear for all scientists which implementations are there. I mean, that's also a service to the community for scientists. I mean, how should you make your data publicly available? So in 5 years from now, I would like to see you all here in Leiden once more, where we can, let's say, evaluate the progress that has been made about what the standards are, how everyone can fit in with this general umbrella, and then have a next meeting. What are the new challenges here?
And I'll defer my answer to George. He will say a few words after. The only thing I'm going to say, George, that until 2 weeks ago, we worked on the principle that you would only be here virtually. Yeah. And when I happened to be in Washington a few weeks ago, George said, I'm so sad I cannot go. Well, come. And he's here. And you said, this is a seminal moment. I want to be there. So that's my answer, but he will fill it in, okay? So let's keep it short.
Yeah.
Okay, so without further ado, Stian, I would like to present to you the Leiden Declaration on Fair Digital Objects.
Thank you very much. Very good. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
I know we've been talking about this a long time. Yeah. Here it is. and really, this is on behalf of the whole community here and those online who also signed this.
What we miss is this enormous signature in here.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of professors. I'm sure someone has, or a doctor who has a great signature for us.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Super. Thank you so much, Stan. And Barend, now I'll turn it over to you.
You're sure it's the... Oh, it's the human
It should
readable.
be the right.
Okay, that's okay.
It's human readable, yeah.
So then it's time for George to sort of close the conference with us. And I'm supposed to introduce him, but he was introduced for his keynote, and everybody knows him. When Luis was tweeting, he said, another legend on the podium. So why would I say much about it? But I would like to say a few personal words. Everybody knows George, everybody knows his accomplishments, but he's above all one of the sweetest people I've met in my life, and I really regard him as a friend. He gave me a lot of good advice, also how to avoid all kinds of pitfalls, and learning from how all the manipulations he did at the beginning of the internet. But one of the things I like most about all his advices they always start with young man. And so we are not an old boys club. I'm young. So George, I think I don't waste any more time. Everybody knows you. We all love you. Get on your spot and tell us your view.
I'm just going to stand right here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Barend, thank you very much. I'm not going to go up on the stage because that'd take longer than I'm going to talk. My wife pointed out to me yesterday that I had talked for a whole hour, and I promised her I would be much more brief today in my remarks. You know from what I said yesterday that I like to look back, look around, and look forward. So I just have three brief slides on those ideas. Looking back, I'm going to look back to a famous publication in 1962 called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And I'd like to slightly expand that to the structure of meta-science revolutions. The first science revolution, as I said yesterday, was enabled by the technology of the printing press, which made science a public activity. Now we are in the middle of the second meta-science revolution, enabled by the technology of network computers, which not only enable the communication of science, enable the advanced production of science. I do think that this second meta-revolution in science will be as significant as the 17th century revolution was. And I'm just going to mention 4 mileposts that have been important in my journey in this area. You may have your own mileposts, and that's fine. The first one that I would point out is the publication by Kahn and his colleague in 1995 on the digital object architecture. Some people now say, oh, that's old stuff. Well, it was premature stuff. It was visionary stuff. There was no way in 1995 we could implement what we're talking about today. Bob Kahn is always thinking ahead, and that's one example. The second milepost is the creation of the semantic web, 2001 or thereabouts, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which has carried modern approaches to data management to a new level. Again, standing on the shoulders of giants. Some wags say that the only new thing about the semantic web was the web, but that's a very significant addition in any event. The third thing I would point out as important, certainly in my situation, is the Fair Data Conference, which we had in 2013, wasn't it, Barend? 2014, where the acronym of FAIR was constructed, again based on the work of many preceding giants. But as I mentioned yesterday, and it's worth repeating, a good acronym goes a long way toward helping public understanding. Well, we've got to put a lot more work into the understanding, but public awareness that something important is going on. Finally, I'd mention that in 2019, in Paris, we had a meeting of 25 intrepid folks immediately following the RDA meeting in Finland the week before, where we, in effect, said, well, how's this going? Should we continue these activities? At the end of the conference, I was also privileged to make some closing remarks there, and I said, well, if we continue working on this and try to build a structure, how many of you are willing to participate? And they raised their hands. So we continued, and the next year we started the formal work toward this conference. And of course, now we have 250 people, not 25 people. I think that's a very nice improvement, and I thank you all for being here. We've certainly talked about FDOs with capital letters and FDOs with small letters. We know we've got a long way to go. Well, that's fine. The journey is at least as important as the destination, right? Maybe even more interesting. So we're going on a wonderful journey. We are on a wonderful journey. One good thing about this meeting is I think that we have emphasized not only the technical dimensions, but the social dimensions. We're talking about a social revolution in terms of the conduct of science, as well as a technical support to make it happen. And so the people who focused on the social side, I think, are especially welcome here. I would describe this meeting in 2 words: intellectually vibrant. And if you're not a native English speaker, I will let you know that the dictionary says vibrant means full of energy and enthusiasm. And that's certainly my characteristic of this. And so let me look ahead with 3 brief points. You've just heard about the Leiden Declaration. I think that's a good milepost going forward, putting a stake in the ground. I think that will be important, again, in public recognition. Barend has mentioned Oscar, this increasingly formal organization of the executives of the regions in the world that have put money into developing open science, commons, and clouds. I think that's great. Finally, I want to give you all the chance to raise your hands too. If we have a 2nd annual FDO conference in 2013, how many will consider coming? 2023. Thank you for your hands. I greatly appreciate that. I'm going to end on two final very quick points. First of all, I'd like you to join me in thanking Demetrius and his colleagues for being wonderful hosts. And my final personal comments, I want to let you know that I feel the same excitement today about data as I felt about the internet 30 years ago. And just as I was privileged to be a part of a small leadership community at that time, I feel the same community around us now, and I feel very privileged to be a small part of it now. So thank you all for being in this community.
Thank you so much, George.
Thanks.
So, and now I think it's time to turn it over to Demetrius for you were going to say goodbye? No? Not to, okay. Now it's time for the music. Just a quick note, we're up against the quarter-hour announcement that will be in Dutch. That does not mean leave. That just means hold on a minute. Okay.
Welcome back. Last Wednesday, you all witnessed Flory being kissed by the machine, not missed by the machine, but kissed, as she went into a fever dream. And when she woke, she had found the answer she had lost. We jump ahead in time now. It's the year 2122. The world is a little bit warmer, but the internet is a meaningful data space. And the researchers of Earth have discovered an approach to science and data processing in which humans and machines live in symbiosis. This is the story of the princess who was kissed by the machine, part 2. A warm welcome to Flory and the Hill Station.
I Nobody's sleeping. Nobody's sleeping. They're all working, making discoveries.
Colleagues, friends, this was it. I really feel honored to be able to be here and close this conference with a few thank you. Before I do that, I would like to say that in our next steps as an FDO forum, I hope that we find the strength, the enthusiasm, the professionalism, and the respect to the entire community to continue what the vision behind the FDO's promises. Nothing of what you've seen today would be possible without the support and the help of a very big group of people, and I would like to thank them. First of all, a very big thank you to the entire steering committee of the conference, and especially my co-chairs, Barend Mons and George Strawn. Thank you very much. It has been an amazing program as well. And I would like to thank the program committee, all the members of the program committee, and especially the co-chairs of the program committee. Peter Wittenburg, where is he? There. Paolo, Budroni, and of course, Larry Lanham, who couldn't join us here today, but I'm sure he's watching online. Thank you very, very much for all the amazing work in putting together the program. A special thank you to the organizations that supported us in making this happen, and especially the City of Leiden, the Leiden organization of City of Science, under its auspices this conference is taking place, and Elsevier. Thank you very much for your support. And finally, probably more importantly at this point, after what you've seen, I would like to thank my team and Anna-Marie and her team for the amazing work that they've done in hosting us here, in making this conference a success. Anna-Marie, I would like to ask you to come on stage together with your team, and because I think it's important that we see you all, and thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm the last one between you and the drinks. So I would like to introduce the team. This is Tina Lou, responsible for speakers, presenters, panelists, abstracts, and a very precise program. Next to me, this is Jose Alonso, responsible for communications. Twitter Guru, responsible for the website, and getting Gracie of her program. And then we have Mark. Mark is responsible for hospitality. Thank you, Mark, for all your kindness and being there whenever you are really needed. And last but not least, this is Gwen, our producer. She's always everywhere, gluing everything together, a walking itinerary. And then I would like to thank you all for being here, for buying tickets, booking hotel rooms, booking flights, and putting all your effort, your energy, your knowledge, and your capabilities to making this happen. So one more applaud for the one next to you for making this happen. Thank you very much. Let's have drinks.
And if I can take 1 minute to thank Anna-Marie Kingma, our project manager. Fantastic.